even the king of Assyria, and all his glory, and he shall come up over all his channels, and go over all his banks.
Richard, verse 8.
And he shall pass through Judah, he shall overflow and go over, he shall reach even to the neck, and stretching out of his wings shall fill the breadth of thy land, O Emmanuel.
Frankie?
Associate yourselves, O ye people, and ye shall be broken in pieces. And give ear, all ye of far countries. Gird yourselves, and ye shall be broken in pieces. Gird yourselves, and ye shall be broken in pieces.
They refused the water of Shiloah. The imagery that Isaiah used, he must have been, they say that Isaiah was, the man Isaiah was, he must have been brilliant. In writing, when God said to Isaiah, take out a pen and write. We've discussed this in our earlier classes, is that God has the ability to allow each writer to use his own thoughts per se, his own style of writing, because every book of the Bible has its own style of writing. It wasn't mechanical. Every writer had their own specific style of writing, and in that style of writing, the Holy Spirit was able to give the authority to the writer in his own particular style that was authentic and God approval. In other words, God gave in their minds how to write and to say things that he approved of, and it's an imagery. The imagery that Isaiah used, they say, is one of the most profound ways, and we really, when it's translated from Hebrew to Greek to English, it's really sometimes hard for us to comprehend what's being said, because, you know, as a general reading of this, if you was to just simply to read that, if you simply read verse, for as much as this people refused the waters of Shiloah that go softly, the average person is going to read that and say, okay, I understand that. What imagery is that using? What is it saying? And unless you have footnotes, or unless someone who has spent a great deal of time trying to discern what's been said, and it was interesting in the book of Luke, he uses, he was using, that's my brother. Is that he used Ananias and Ananias and Annas and no, not Simeon, Cappius. And if you don't know the history of those two priests, you lose the significance of what that was all about. And unless you understand history, you're not going to have any understanding of what Isaiah was saying. They refused the water of Shiloah. Mount Moriah, a hill of the Lord, is Shiloah. It was the hill on which the temple was built. And the spring is said to have the spring of water that is said to have been within the very precinct of the temple. When the temple was built, there was a spring that was in the very heart of the temple, and it supplied its courts and its cisterns with an abundant water required for its immeasurable washing and sacrifice. And so provided in that temple was the ability for water to continue to flow. And from the summit of the hill, it now flows gently to its base, not along any external channel, however, but through a secret tunnel, which it seems to have worn for itself through the solid rock. The stream of water and the spring of water graciously has penetrated through the rocks on the top of the hill, flows down into the temple, and gives the temple people and the workers sufficient amount of water to accomplish the purpose that God wanted into the temple. Its waters, therefore, flows underground, running far below before they meet the light of day. And when they re-emerge, they rise and flow without noise or turbulence. It's hard for us in the modern day to get a grasp of that. The earliest that I can remember was going to my grandma's house, and they didn't have no running. They didn't have faucets. And they didn't have wells. She didn't have a well. They had a spring. And in the spring, they had built a cover for it, and water flowed into that spring, and for 50 years, it continually flowed in, and it was pure, wonderful water.
They used to have one there in Portsmouth.
There on Kenny's Lane.
There on Kenny's Lane, where people would go and get the water, and I don't know whatever happened to it.
And it flows, and the imagery is, it says, and the water of Shiloah that goes forth softly. Isn't that interesting? And if you can have the imagery of that, safely and gently. And they form no brawling turbulence, no swift and angry streams, sweeping away its banks and carrying havoc before it. It just softly flowed.
That's the way it does.
And the water, and it didn't overflow. The spring never overflowed. From what I understand, the spring never overflows, but it was always there when you needed it. You never knew when it was coming in. It just was there when you needed it. And here is the imagery that Isaiah is saying. Softly and gently, they rise and fill the pool. Softly and gently, they overflowed into a stream that does not call even in times of drought. It's always there. There was never a drought in the temple. It constantly flowed. My mother, my grandma, if I remember correctly, said it never did run dry. In all the years they lived there, it never run dry. It was constant. A stream that quickened all it touched into life and reveals its presence only by the beauty which marks its course. And I always was trying to figure out, where did it start? Where did the stream start from? And I'd always run back and forth trying to find it, and running over cows and chickens and chasing turkeys and so forth, but I never did find where it started. It was all underground. Yep. And God's grace is there. So the waters of Shiloah that go swiftly. The waters of Shiloah that go swiftly. And this speaks to us of the mercies of our present life. Now you understand that though there is a physical expression, but we need to always remember that there always was a spiritual thought involved in that. So this speaks of the mercies of our present life, softly flowing. They flow constantly. They roll by us almost unheard. But this is our life. But too often, as did this kingdom abuse the stream of mercies. The constant flow of God's grace, constantly flowing in our lives, supplying our needs, everything that we need to live a holy life, a righteous life, a life within God's concept, is continually to flow, but too often we abuse it. First of all, number one is by rejecting it. There's a rejection. People reject the flow of God's mercies. They refuse the waters of Shiloah. That is, they refuse to avail themselves of those means, and Israel did, of national improvement and defense. They refuse to trust God in their danger. And that's the story that we're learning in this last two chapters, that God gave Isaiah to go to the king and tell him, don't make alliance with the enemy. And God is telling us, I'm enough to supply your needs. Number two is presumptuous. We just presume, presumptuous. They rejoiced in all that they had. They put their confidence, they made an alliance, they made this wonderful alliance, and they thought surely that things were going to be okay. And the enemy was happy to accommodate them. And the enemy says, we'll join you to fight against your enemy, and we'll get rid of your enemy. By the way, they're our enemies. And so when they bound together, guess what? When they got with their enemy, the enemy got with the king, and they came down, and once they won success, the enemy that was with them turned them in to their slaves. They put their confidence in wicked men. Their hope of safely resting on the confidence they had in was mere worldly alliances. When you make an alliance with worldly people, they trust in the arms of the flesh. When you're saying, well, I'm going to put my trust in worldly things to get me through, I can share with you, you will be usually disappointed over a period of time. We abuse God's mercy when we allow it not to inspire us with unshaken confidence in His protection, His love, and His power. You need just to circle that. Did I put that in there, didn't I? Yeah. We abuse God's mercy when we allow it not to inspire us with unshaken confidence in His protection, love, and power. Can I share with you that His mercy continuously to flow into our lives? His mercy continues to flow. We may not see it because it's underground. His mercy is flowing. Every believer has the mercy of God in several different ways that's flowing into our lives, and if we abuse it or presume that we don't need it, and we make alliance with our enemies, thinking that they are the one who's going to protect us, and our safety is in the hands of worldly people and worldly adventures and worldly ideas, we are making a mistake. I can do all things through Christ that strengthen me. I can do what? All things. We don't need to make alliances with the world for our safety. This abuse of mercy leads to retribution and misery. Shallow. Now the word shallow also is a type of gospel. If you want to spiritualize it to some degree, we can say that a type of gospel, grace, gospel influence. In verse 5, it is a gospel of peace. The water of Shiloah, verse 5. Number one, did I put it? Is there a blank? Is that where the blank starts? I haven't got my.
No, they're on the back page. I'm
on the back page now, aren't I? filtered